Dr. Griffen, I want to thank you for coming on the show today to share your stories with our viewers and our listeners. Could you briefly tell us what's going on in your life and your K-12 career right now?
Well, it's a lot going on, but a lot is starting to slow down since we've been in the school year, the first part of June. So right now, I was recently promoted to Chief Equity Officer from Vice President of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, DSST Public Schools. So this is I just concluded my 4th year, so my 5th year has already started. We're deep into getting ready for summer development. I own new staff training, so I'm super excited about having new staff training for the first time in person since the pandemic.
Awesome.
It's always been in person. The last 2 years it was virtual. This time we will be in person, and I'm trying to make sure that the energy is high and we're alive and we're going to get it going. Got a lot of wonderful sessions for our new staff, which includes our teachers, our paraprofessionals, any new leaders, support staff, college success individuals, our social workers, anyone that's new to DSST goes through new staff training for 2 days. So that'll be July 25th and 26th before our new teacher training. So that's what's going on in my professional life. Trying to finish up my book I was telling you about, The Power of a Praying Principle.
Okay.
My publisher, he said, hey, take your time because, Fighting the Good Fight had just come out with my colleague, Dr. Isaac Carrier. So he was like, hey, and I'm realizing it's only been 6 months since that book has come out.
Wow.
So it's only been 6 months, but it feels longer because it's pretty hot along with the other one, Race Mentoring and P12 Educators. So those 2 books are going. So I said, okay, I'm going to get back to it this June after we close out the year and see what's going on. My boys, one is about to start tackle football again for the Aurora Spartans.
Okay.
He picked up his alto saxophone yesterday because he will be playing saxophone in 6th grade. The 15-year-old just came back from Boulder. We went up there for his piano lesson with his piano teacher because the goal is in 2 years when he graduates, he will be majoring in music composition at Boulder. So
awesome.
That's what I'm hoping. And then my wifey, she's coming up on a year, June 30th, she defended her doctorate.
Wow.
Leadership, and interdisciplinary studies. So she's now ready to start she's already working for Aurora Public Schools, but I'm already messing with her, trying to get her to get the publishing chops going. Like, hey, honey, it's time for you to start putting some of that practitioner scholarship your husband keeps talking about.
That's awesome.
You need to start getting it out there. So yeah, man, that's what's going on right now.
That's awesome. So 2 Dr. Griffins. I love it.
2 Dr. Griffins. That's right. Dr. K.
Dr. K. Dr. K and Dr. A. I love it.
Yeah, that's what's up, man.
That's what's up. So you mentioned that you've only been in Colorado for a short time, but where were you at? Where did your K-12 career start? Where are you originally from?
So I was raised in Corpus Christi, Texas.
Okay.
Know Selena, the Tejano star. She was from
okay.
Corpus Christi. Her statue is down at the Bayfront. I actually got to visit it. So I'm from Corpus Christi, went to Prairie View A&M University, historically Black college and university, northwest of Houston. I got my history and English bachelor's degrees and my master's of educational leadership from Prairie View, and then became a teacher in 1999 in Aldine ISD in Houston, Texas.
Okay.
I was one of those older teachers. I had a great time in undergrad, so I graduated at 23. And then, I'm gonna go back to school, and that's when I got my history degree. I said, I'm not ready to teach anybody's children. So at 25, I started my teaching career and walked in and looked at the curriculum and made a decision. If I'm gonna affect change, I need to go be a superintendent. So I went down to Prairie View and said, hey, I came to get my superintendency license, and they were like, hey, you're a little young, aren't you? And for the listeners, you got to remember, this is the South.
Sure.
So as I transition into these words, you got to understand that this is the Southern dialect
sure.
that we're at. Yeah. And they said, how old are you, baby? I said, I'm 25. They said, wow, you a young principal. How long you been a principal? I said, oh, no, I'm not a principal. I just started teaching. They said, well, baby, you got to be a principal before you can be a superintendent. Here, let me help you out, sweetheart. You can hear him in the background. Bless that boy's heart. So,
a lot of ambition.
So I got it going, man. Started that master's degree, met my wife the following year, and then she was already enrolled in Prairie View. I didn't know her at that time. Mm-hmm. We both graduated together in 2002 with our master's in educational leadership. And after another 4 years, I became assistant principal. After 7 years as an English teacher in the same school, Grantham Academy.
Awesome.
I was there 15 years as an English teacher. And then as an assistant principal, I was also a basketball coach, oversaw multiple areas. And then in 2014, I was getting ready for ARA and getting ready I just finished my dissertation research and got a DM from LinkedIn. Hey,
Okay.
Aaron, have you ever considered relocating? Would you consider Colorado Springs? Like, what? So I was like, hey, what's going on? And I talked to Dr. Andre Spencer, who was the superintendent at the time, down in Harrison District 2. And he was like, hey, we have a high school position. You should, consider applying. I applied, interviewed twice, had to fly up both times on my dime. For all the folks out there that when people tell you, man, they'll fly you out. That's not entirely true. When people start telling you they'll fly you, no, I had to fly out twice on my own dime, round trip tickets while I'm still finishing my doctoral research. So funny thing, man, I can't even say it. I was about to give it up. We can't do that at this. But I was in one spot and I was there, got the call that I had the second interview as soon as I landed in Houston, and turned around the very next morning, like I just landed that day. Okay. Got a call, said we want you to come back for a second interview. Turned around and flew right back out.
Wow.
Yeah, flew right back out. Because it'd been like a couple of weeks, and I had to go. I landed, turned around, flew right back out.
Wow.
So it was a tiring time, and got to be a principal for 4 years. Down at Sierra High School, loved my kids and staff, loved that community. I'm still in touch with several of those individuals.
Sure.
The sports and things that got going on. And then after 4 years as a principal, DSST had that job, Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And I didn't know that 4 years later, it'd be one of the hottest jobs in the country, one of the most hated jobs in the country.
Sure.
The most polarizing jobs in the country. And I've come to accept that people say, well, that's divisive. Well, I'm starting to ask people, when you say divisive, if you're a mathematician, what are you dividing from?
Ooh.
You're telling me I'm divisive. Tell me what I'm dividing from. They said Barack Obama was the most divisive president in history. So I thought about it. I've been reflecting on it. I said, well, maybe he was, because he was a division from the norm. And because he was a division from the norm, and usually our choices were two white male presidents.
Sure.
When Barack Obama came in, now there are people who were divided and started voting for him. So maybe he was the most divisive because he was dividing from the norm.
Absolutely.
So that's my push for anyone. And when people say that's divisive, ask them, what is it dividing from? Like, what is the whole that you're trying to maintain that suddenly me talking about this is dividing from that? Like, what are you trying to control that you feel that I'm dividing from?
Wow.
Have people explain that to you folks, listeners. Have them explain, what am I dividing from? Because then you'll get an idea what the root of the problem is, what the real issue they're having with some of these topics we're covering in higher ed and K12 and other areas.
That's real powerful, Dr. Griffen. You're right. When I think back 10 years ago, I don't know of any major school district that even had this as a role in their district. So it is a new position. And like you said, it can be a polarizing position. So having said that, what do you like most about your current role, and what do you like least about your current role?
What I like most about my current role, and I've shared this here and there in various ways. What I like most about it is I know that I'm doing exactly what I was called to do.
Okay.
I get to, from a spiritual perspective, I get to walk in my gift.
Okay.
Because this is who I am. This is what I am 24 hours a day. It doesn't matter. I can be in a Walmart, King Super. I can be at McDonald's. It does not matter. That lens never turns off.
Excellent.
So to give the people an example, if I'm in Walmart and I notice that there is a young teenage worker being mistreated by an adult, I'm going to feel some kind of way about that. Like, hey, this child's 17 years old. You are a grown woman and you're snapping at this child for whatever reason. You're a grown woman. You have all the power. You have all the privilege. You have all the entitlement. You have all the authority because you can get that child fired and you know it. So there are times where I've actually called stores and asked for the manager and said, hey, I was over at this register with this student, or that not student, this employee, and that person, that patron was rude and they were wrong. I'm here to tell you that child did not do what she said they did or he said they did. So I've called stores. I've done it 3 to 5 times where I've called stores and talked to the manager personally, saying that person was rude.
Right.
You know, so the lens never turns off for me. I'm always watching to see how people are being marginalized, and people don't like the word oppressed and suppressed, but it's real.
Yeah,
you
it is what it is.
When you know you have the power to ruin their life.
Absolutely.
Right on the spot. And I'm talking about it can be a white woman and a white teenage boy.
Sure.
I've actually had to call a manager because of that, because this teenage boy is getting screamed at by this person, and the manager thinks it's him, pulls him off the line. I'm like, no. All he did was say, ma'am, how's your day today? And then she lost her mind.
Mm-hmm.
See what I'm saying? So, you know, so I wear this every day, all day. This is just who I am. So
Sure.
what I like to, so going back to what I like most about the job is that the people in my organization have recognized that this is just who I am.
Okay.
They never asked me to turn it off, because
Okay.
I can't turn it off, and I won't turn it off. This is my research.
Right.
So, and then I get to do the work. See, as you acknowledged, this role is still relatively new.
Sure.
This role is normally a chief diversity officer, something that is normally under human resources, and part of the role is recruitment and retention and all of that.
Sure.
I'm not under human resources.
Okay.
I was under human capital for 3 years. This year they moved me out of human capital, and made me separate. But I was never responsible for hiring and anything. I supported on retention, and I supported on hiring biases and practices and things like that.
Okay.
So my role is a cross-functional role of the whole organization. I'm not siloed to one area. So they've never done that to me. Like, I've never had to have guardrails.
Okay.
I don't have guardrails. I don't have too many layers to get to the CEO. The CEO is the next layer for me.
Okay.
He has been for the last year and a half.
Right.
You come directly to me. If it wasn't him, my boss was the chief talent officer, and then him.
Right.
But I was still meeting with him weekly. So
Right.
that's what I love about my job. And I get to go to every school, every student, every staff member, any parent I can get a hold of. I'm not hidden. I'm not out of sight, out of scene. It's right there in front. Aaron Griffen is right here. Dr. Aaron. I do my publishing. I do all my stuff. I get to do it. And I get to push, man. I get to challenge. I get to disrupt. I get to make people uncomfortable when it need be. I get to push back on people's mindsets. I get to challenge myself and learn. Every week is new in my job.
Wow.
Every single week. I mean, and I'm gonna give this example, and then I'm gonna transition to what I like the least. I'm looking at the data, and when someone asked me, like, if you had 10 things that you were most excited about this year, one of them was looking at our post data and noticing that our white males at a particular school, we have this question that says, in the past 12 months, I have had to hide my identity to fit in at DSST.
Okay.
And then I looked, and at one of our schools, which usually trends pretty high, white males were trending low.
Oh, wow.
Which was odd. I'm like, hold up, because I know a lot of the people there.
Mm-hmm.
What's going on? I go talk to these individuals, and they're shocked. They say, wait a minute, I know you look at data. I know you look at the comments, but you're actually wanting to find out why white males feel like they have to hide their identity. I say, yeah, because I'm not the DEI over just black and brown people. I'm VP of DEI over everybody.
Sure.
Your experience is not good. Then we need to figure out, what are we doing? Because we don't need these pendulums to be swinging too far left, too far right. We don't need all that. So that was one of my most exciting moments, when these individuals looked at me and they were smiling like, you're not playing. I'm like, no. So we need to address why you feel that way. Why you feel like you can't show up authentically who you are if we are living the human condition and we're educating and we're eliminating educational inequity. That's for everybody.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
For everybody.
Absolutely.
Yes, black and brown children are being centered, but it's still for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it is. What I like least about the job, it really, it's not my job itself. I've told this to people. There are days where I wake up and I wonder if I am capable of doing what I am able to do. Okay. And, let me explain. So I am able to do this job with no guardrails.
Okay.
I have enough institutional trust and organizational trust that if Aaron says, we can trust that Aaron is going to go the right way.
Okay.
But am I capable of doing it? Do I have the capacity? Do I have the knowledge? Do I have the bandwidth? Do I have the emotional and mental maturity and bandwidth to actually do that? Some folks may call that stereotype threat. Some might call it imposter syndrome. It's not any of that. I am a human being who knows that I don't know everything.
Sure.
And equity moves so fast, like technology, that some days I wake up and I don't know what to do.
Sure.
Like we have situations that happen and I'm like, hey, y'all got to give me 20 minutes because I got to really think through what is happening.
Sure.
And what are the possible outcomes? And then I got to call some people.
There you go.
Call some folks and like, hey, this. So it's days. So that's what I like least about the job is that it's very, very. No, I'm not going to say it's very inconsistent because that's not the right word. It's very nuanced.
Sure.
Very nuanced. So we go from Black Lives Matter to you can't talk about Black Lives Matter. We go from we need to come together as a country to you can't talk about the evils of the country.
Yeah.
We go from we embrace everybody to you can't say certain words around certain children around certain ways because it makes them uncomfortable.
Wow.
But for years, sink or swim was the mantra that was celebrated under capitalism and business. Sink or swim, those who can do, those who can't. So now the people who can't are now doing. Now there's legislation trying to stop us from actually doing.
Wow, that's powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. You know, Dr. Griffen, the worldwide pandemic has negatively impacted our students, our staff, our communities, not only in the United States, but in the world. How has the pandemic impacted you, your family, and your career?
So I'll start with my wife. She doesn't like me saying this, but I'm saying anyway, the queen of the house. One of the things that happened with her early on was that number one, their salary was frozen.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Right after the pandemic where she was working previously. And then the following year, not only was her salary frozen, then they decided to make cuts to people in her positions, the coaches, which gave a lot of latitude for folks to get rid of or not have people they really didn't want or might have been rocking the boat. That's my words. So my wife's job was cut. Mm-hmm. So she was without employment for a minute because we talked about it. I'm like, finish your doctorate.
Oh, okay.
Finish your doctorate, trust in the Lord. If you feel like that your pathway is here, then do that. So she was without employment. So that's how the pandemic impacted her. With my boys, they didn't like being home during the pandemic.
Sure.
They did not like working online. They didn't like none of that.
Right.
They said the sooner we can get back in school, the better. And I'm like, why? They said because it is not fun having you and mom watching us on our laptops all the time.
Sure.
Making us do this all the time.
Right.
Hearing y'all in meetings all the time.
Yeah.
So that was the impact on them. For me, the pandemic impacted me in a myriad of ways.
Okay.
Number one, the pandemic automatically took me into a frame of mind of we're on the verge of something dangerous right now.
Okay.
I mean, as soon as we shut down, I called my boss. I didn't call. I sent an email to my boss and to the CEO. And I said, we need to do a PD real quick. Like we did a professional development online. I said, all PD has to now go online. So that was a positive aspect. So now
Sure.
I can do PD. We've been doing PD virtual, hybrid, all that. We got it going on now. And the first thing I did was a PD on how the pandemic and social distancing actually creates more systems of inequity.
Okay.
So before all the data came out, I could tell our staff what was going to happen. I said, what's going to happen is that because of the health disparities and because of the traditions of this country, certain groups are going to be segmented as people who are the dangerous ones. This social distancing can lead to quarantining, similarly to what happened with concentration camps with the Japanese and Germans and Italian Americans, similarly to what happened to Mexican Americans with the Great Depression when they started deporting into Mexico. People, This is what they don't want us teaching in school. Learn your history.
Yeah. Yeah.
During the Great Depression, the United States has a contract with Mexico where migrant workers come over and help during their harvest season. During the Great Depression, Mexican American workers were removed from jobs for white males, and a lot of them were deported. It was called the American Repatriation Act.
Okay.
And I believe it's between 60 and 80% of the people deported were American-born citizens who looked Mexican.
Wow.
Fast forward to 2016, to 2020, anyone who looked illegal were detained.
Yeah.
Even if they were American citizens and didn't have their ID, they were detained. It wasn't white Americans being detained. So when people talk about they need to get in illegal, what about me being born here? So
Sure.
the pandemic caused me to go back in history.
Okay.
To prepare for what's coming. So I already knew that the data was going to tell us that Black and brown and indigenous people and elderly people were more likely to die from COVID. Not catch COVID, but die from COVID.
Sure. 100.
Because we don't have insurance. We don't have the medical benefits. We don't have the transportation. We don't have the resources. Our diets. So we already have ailments, which I agreed with a lot of the conspiracy people that said, are they really dying from COVID or are they dying for something else, which is true. If you're a person with diabetes and asthma, I have asthma. So when everybody was protesting, I can't go protest. I have asthma.
Sure.
Tear gas hit me, I might not get up.
Right. 100.
I catch COVID, I might not get up.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? So it impacted me to think more globally and historically about what is happening. So that's how it impacted me. It caused my work to become virtual. My consultancy, I'm a consultant. I started doing more consulting work like in Hawaii and Canada and all these other places. It gave me time to finish my books because I was so focused on getting out knowledge. Like people need to know what is going on while the world is at still. Sure. That's why people don't realize it's been 2-3 years because the world was at a standstill. Everything was the same. And I said, when all the Band-Aids come off and we get back to quote, quote, regular life, I need to make sure I got my 2 books out with my 3rd book about to come out. So that's what happened to me. I got promoted to vice president at the end of 2020. In the summer of 2020. Now I got promoted now. A lot of my work is now really taking a look at the disproportionate harm of mental health on certain groups, which includes Black, Hispanic, LGBTQIA youth in particular. I'm taking a look at the mental health aspects of bullying and things like that in my work. And so I don't really focus on bullying. That's not my research area. But when I'm doing professional development around equity and inclusion and belonging, I'm making sure people understand the various ways we experience reality. No one experienced the pandemic the exact same way.
Sure.
I'm in an affluent neighborhood. Some of my colleagues didn't go back to work. They're not in education. They didn't go back to work. Some of my colleagues retired and sold their houses. Some of my neighbors, pandemic hit, they retired, they sold their house, they moved.
Wow.
Some of them still unemployed right now. They weren't in education. They were in corporate so all these things, and that's what I love about my work, because all these things impact me in some kind of way, because when I go into DSST, I talk about my community and what they're telling me and what I'm hearing and how that relates to our kids. So that's how, that the pandemic, some negative things, but it was also some positive things too.
Wow, that's powerful. Sometimes, Dr. Griffen, our K12 profession gets a really bad rap. Why do you believe the K12 education profession is such a noble profession?
You didn't ask the right question. Golly, I was hoping you was going to ask. I've been waiting. So here's the deal. Okay. We are the profession that creates every other profession.
100%.
Period. We create every other profession. Without education, there are no lawyers, there are no doctors, there are no educators, there are no military. There's none of this without teachers in K12.
Absolutely.
Period. People will say, well, I homeschool. You were still a teacher.
100%. Yeah.
Period. You still follow the curriculum.
Yep.
Because you got to get something to credit. You still took the test. You still followed something. So quit taking away from P12. But here's the question I was hoping you was going to ask. Why does education always get a bad rap? Here's the reason why.
Okay, that's good.
Because according to, I forgot the woman's name, L. Berline, 1993. I remember her talking about in her book, can't remember the title right now, it's over here on the bookshelf, talking about the book about and Jonathan Cazal talks about this in Savage Inequalities, the investability of education. The reason why education gets a bad rap and education does not get the resources that they know we need is because there's no return on investment financially.
Wow.
Education is nonprofit and private. Not private, but nonprofit and public.
Yes.
Military has been privatized. People always ask the question, how do they always have so much money for this and not for that? Because there are people who pass laws who are invested in military stock. Go Google it. You can Google it. These folks are invested in Boeing. Military stock. So when they put $900 billion into stock, that money matriculates back to people who are invested in it.
Sure.
The stock rises.
Sure.
That's why.
Wow.
If you know education needs this, why don't you do it? Because it's not investable.
Wow.
Well, they're investing in the future of children. No. We're talking about capitalism.
Yes.
Education, when you put money in education, there is no return on investment. There is no stock in education. There's no stock. You don't get to go to Apple or Acorn or whoever that is and go and say, well, I'm going to buy 10 shares of this public schools. And then when the stock go up, you make $1 million and then you cash out your stock.
Good point.
But you can do that in military stock.
That's a good point.
You can do that. You can do that in oil and gas.
Yes.
You can do that in water. You can have people sit there and pass legislation and go buy stock in the area that the legislation is going to impact. Or you can have people dump stock before the legislation goes out.
We've seen that happen before the pandemic.
Come on, folks. But see, people know this, but they choose not to worry about it.
Sure.
Education is an easy area to blame when the country is in disarray. The teachers we weren't responsible for the pandemic, but we were responsible that children were educated and fed during the pandemic. We're the ones that fed kids during the pandemic. We're the ones that opened up our schools and had kids show up and eat during the pandemic. We're the ones that had to pivot to online learning for the first time. In many cases, some school districts didn't even have one-to-one laptops.
That's true.
We're the ones that figured that out. Suddenly, it took a pandemic for technology to start to donate laptops to schools. Suddenly, it took a pandemic for people to offer Wi-Fi and hotspots to schools. Technology became a utility. It's not a luxury anymore. It is a utility now.
Sure, that's a very good point.
And water. That's what you got to have. Educators did that. The governor didn't do that. The mayors, the president, Congress, they didn't come up with a plan. We came up with the plan and we implemented the plan. Then when the pandemic is over, no one wants to talk to us about how we did that. Think about it. Every decision that comes out, educators are not a part of that decision. But when the pandemic hit, none of them knew what to do, did they?
Wow.
Kids are in school misbehaving. None of them knows what to do they? All they keep saying is parents got to do better. Educators got to do better. We need to, no, why don't you, and let us run that. Let us run the Department of Education.
Sure.
Let us tell you what the budget needs to be for education. Let us tell you the people who are actually in the trenches, the people who show up every day. No offense to anybody. I'm not talking about the people who's been out of education for 15, 20 years.
Sure.
They were in education and now they're researchers and scholars. Love you. But you've been out 20 years. Education is not the same as it was 20 years ago. It's not even the same as it was 1 year ago.
Isn't that something? Wow.
So that's what makes us so noble on the flip side of that.
Absolutely.
That if you leave us alone and give us our resources, we can tell you how to fix, quote, quote, education. But
Wow.
the problem is they don't want to hear it because they know what we're going to tell them. We're going to tell them, y'all need to take some of that spending on other places, put it here.
Absolutely.
We're going to tell you to quit doing this, quit doing that.
Sure.
We want our curriculum to tell the whole truth. We want our math to be more culturally responsive and relevant.
So that's a really good segue into my next question. You know, it's clear that you have really a macro view of K-12 education. What are your long-term goals? Are you going to be a superintendent one day?
I wanted to be a superintendent until I became a principal. Once I became a principal, I said, you know what? No. I said, no. When you are the number one, when you're the number one, that's something different. That when you are it, when you are the final D of a whole, because a school is an organization. I need people to understand that.
Sure.
A school is an organization. When you are the principal of a school, you are a CEO of a organization, of a larger organization. That's systems thinking. You are the CEO of your building.
Sure.
Your staff. You are responsible for those folks. So I realized at that time, I said, you know what? I don't know what the superintendent is for me. And then when I got to DSST and became director of diversity, equity, inclusion, and watched my CEO deal with some of the things he deals with as a white affluent man who's constantly trying to build an organization where equity is core, and the decisions he has to make with opening new schools or closing a school, things like that. I'm like, you know what? I just don't want that stress.
Sure.
I need the flexibility because he's 15 now, but when I moved to DSST, I never forget, my son was in 6th grade. And he looked at me one day and he said, you know what, Dad, I hope you never leave DSST. And I said, why? He said, because since you've been at DSST, he said, you're happier.
Wow.
You're laughing again. You have way more time for us. And he said, you have more flexibility. I considered going to another district for another role, a higher role, after my first year. And I asked him, what are your thoughts? He was 13 at the time.
Okay.
And he was like, Dad, I really would prefer you stay in DSST. And I said, why? He said, because I told you before, you're available. That's the first time he used that word. He said, you're always available. I like that if I need you to come to the school, you can come to the school.
Doc, you got a lot going on.
Yeah, I do.
Wow.
When I think of work-life balance, I think of work, what I do for DSST, and life, what I do with my family, and what I do as a human being in the larger scope. So what gives me energy is spending time with my family, doing things like this, with people, presenting, consult. That gives me energy outside of my work. So that's my work-life balance. So when I say I do this 24 hours, that means like we have this call. My boss is going to ask me, hey, Aaron, how was your weekend? What did you do? And I'm going to tell him I was on this call with you. And he's going to go, oh, great. Because they know when I'm doing this, that means I'm up here.
100%.
When I'm not doing podcasts and guest lecturing, then my energy starts to go down. I got to get out and educate. So that's how I maintain that work-life balance. And another time is sometimes I just got to step away and say no. Sometimes I got to turn down consulting gigs.
Sure.
Sometimes I got to back away from publishing. Hey, y'all, I can't write this right now. Sometimes I got to say no to presenting at conferences. Sometimes I got to say, honey, Langston goes to practice tonight. While he's at practice, I'm going to go to McDonald's or I'm going to go over to Starbucks and I'm just going to go do some work, or I'm just going to read, or I'm just going to listen to music, lay in the bed and listen to gospel music all day.
Sure.
Yeah, that's how I maintain that. Making sure on Sundays there's something spiritual going on. We're not at church, we're watching TD Jakes, or we're at least listening to some gospel music.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, we have that in common for sure. Yeah, I don't look at this as, a part of my job. I look at this as part of my calling, truthfully, and I love it. I love connecting with people like yourself, with phenomenal educators like yourself. I call it sharpening the saw, right? Just keep it sharp, 100, right? And so, it's been really, really good even having this conversation with you today. I've learned so many good things from you. I want to take a moment and just honor you and acknowledge the work that you've done over the last 20 years as a K12 educator, whether you were impacting the lives of students in Houston, Texas, and all of the students that you've impacted in the state of Colorado. We definitely thank you for all the work that you've done. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Yes, sir. I also want to thank you for coming on the show today. But before you leave, would you please give all the K12 educators that are watching you or listening to you right now some parting words of wisdom? Tell us how we can connect with you, and then we'll say goodbye.
The school year has ended. We're all catching our collective breath.
Yes.
In another 45 days, we will begin to feel the tension of a new school year.
Just like
and we will begin to relive the trauma of this past year. All the discipline issues, all the resignations, all these things that could have went wrong. Murphy's Law of Education went wrong. Okay. Don't stop and don't quit. Right now, we have a body of people that are actually imploring us to quit. They're telling us to quit. They're celebrating every time one of us quits and resigns and posts on Twitter and LinkedIn and Facebook, I quit today. I resigned today. I've done it. And people are celebrating this. Wow. And then on the flip side, we need more educators. But you just celebrated resignations.
Wow.
So I'm telling you, if this is your calling is not always easy. Those of us who are called, we're going to be challenged.
Sure.
It's easy to walk away. It's easy to say, y'all deal with it. It's much harder to actually stick it through. And I'm not telling you to give up on your mental health and all that. I'm not telling you that. What I'm telling you is, you got to stick it out. If this is your calling, stick it out. It always gets better with them. Don't give up. I've been in this game 23 years now. Yeah, 23 years. And I'm not retiring until both of my kids are out of college. So I more than likely will be in this game another 17 years. I won't retire until I'm about 65. Out of public education, P12.
Sure.
65, I'll probably consider, I probably would be out. Yeah. 65 is probably the longest in public education, P12. Then I'll consider something else unless something comes up. But this is who I am. This is what I do. And it is hard. It is hard. And it is hard. But it's also hard for a truck driver.
Sure.
It's also hard for a policeman. It's hard for a firefighter. It's hard for a doctor. Everybody's job is hard.
Sure.
So don't leave education thinking you're going to find something easier and less stressful. Some people will tell you, and I'm sorry, I'm going long-winded. Some people will call you and brag to death about their new job and convince you, only to see 6 months later they're looking for another job.
Wow.
And y'all know I'm about to pass the collector plate. I'm preaching. Y'all know who those people are. You need to leave. I found it better over here. 6 months later, they're telling you they're about to resign from the next job. Or they mad at that boss. So you make sure you do what's best for you and trust in you. And if you think if education was your calling before this year, educating is your calling now. It's just hard. That's all.
There you go. How do we connect with you, Doc?
You can connect with me on Twitter at Dr. Aaron J. Griffen, Griffen. LinkedIn, Dr. Aaron J. Griffen. We're actually Aaron J. Griffen, PhD. Okay. I'm on Instagram at Dr. Aaron J. Griffen. My website is www.draaronjgriffen.com. That's it.
There's a little bit of a theme going there, Dr. Aaron J. Griffen.
Yep.
Well, once again, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show. This has been really, really good. I've learned a lot from you just during our conversation. And I definitely want you to come back on the show again if you're willing.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you so much.
Oh, yeah. Call me anytime. I got you.
All right. Well, thank you so much, my brother. I really appreciate you. And I wish you and your family all the best.
All right, appreciate you, man. Thank you.
All right, take care.